Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. Petra's presentation highlighting the demographic trends was a great opening to what I want to talk about, which is not about technology, but about who will tackle the challenges facing the profession. And so really wanting to make sure that there is a grounding in building an inclusive workforce in geodesign and also adjacent professions, and doing that with a lens on understanding what is inclusion and providing you some strategies around how do you deploy an inclusive mindset in your workforce. And so just a bit about me that allows me to stand in front of you talking about workforce. My career started as an urban planner with the city of St. Paul, Minnesota. And in between, I had a journey in public policy as a lobbyist, and also capping my career up until last year, I was in the governor's administration as his deputy chief of staff and also the commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And so very focused on building workforce throughout the state of Minnesota, but also making sure that the businesses in Minnesota have what they need. And so the work that I do my consulting firm, Policy Grounds, focuses on this principle of the future is for those that design the policies and processes that govern them. And that is really true with respect to the work that you all do in the area of geodesign and bringing forth ideas and solutions that change the face of communities. And so it's very important to understand this convergence of inclusion with the work that you're doing. So what is inclusion? And why is it important? And so it's really focused on how do we make sure that there's many voices in the room? And what are those outcomes of having inclusion as a part of your strategy? And it's fostering innovation, bringing those diverse ideas to the table. An outcome is a competitive advantage, because when at the bottom line, when you are, no matter what your focus is on people, profit, or planet, when you have a set of diverse voices in the room, you are bringing forth a deeper and richer outcome. And then a vision of possibility. As you think about the workforce, you become a place where people want to come because they see themselves. The founder of the Children's Defense Fund, Miriam Wright Elderman, said, "You can't be what you can't see." And so being a vision of possibility and having a workforce that looks like the people that you're going out in the community to impact makes a difference. And so that is very important to an inclusive workforce. The business and moral imperative really focusing on how do you reimagine places while tackling issues, those issues that Petra spoke to us about. Being able to have inclusive ideas at the table to tackle those are going to be what we need, because we have some grand challenges in front of us in so many different areas, and it's going to take not doing the same old thing. And lastly, just those equitable project outcomes. When we're going into communities and we're looking for win-win solutions, when you have inclusive voices at the table, you're able to deliver outcomes that get to everyone being able to win. And so those are very important factors that come in when you're looking at building an inclusive workforce. So I am an owner of a technology company, and what we learn in technology is version 1 is better than version none. And so you got to start somewhere. And so I'm not going to assume that you all work in environments that are not inclusive and that you haven't started a journey of making sure that you're preparing for the future of work and your future workforce. But we have to start somewhere. And so one of the things that as you think about geodesign and what's core to the work that you're doing, it's stakeholder engagement. And as I mentioned, those reimagining places and tackling issues and looking at shifts with respect to race and disability and gender and health. And as we look at our workforce all across this country, we're facing huge workforce shortages. And so how are we making sure that as a profession that the door is open to all that have interest in redesigning communities, and that we're not looking in the same places? And that is something that we have to make sure we're thinking about. And so it's imperative that we build a pipeline of diverse professionals that can bring those lived and learned experiences to the table to be able to tackle those issues. So it's critical when we think about the work that we're doing in this profession, the who and the how is very much so important. And so the strategies that I'll just focus on very quickly to leave you with will focus on that who and that how. And so the first thing that is important, and again, this is a lightning talk, so just know that under each of these strategies, there's a lot of understanding that needs to take place, but also commitment and work to doing your just importance around making sure that you're prepared to drive towards an inclusive workforce. So the first one is collective ownership. It starts at the top. You have to make sure that the leadership of your organization or you are committed to developing a strategy around building an inclusive workforce. It's going to take everyone. And so leadership at the top commits to the work, craft the vision, and communicate the way forward. And every aspect of an organization must drive this change. And it's about ownership. Because when you think about just the concept of just from a housing perspective, you act a certain way when you rent something, but when you own it, you show up differently. And so how do we make sure that every part of the organization see themselves in the strategy around building a workforce of today and a workforce of tomorrow? And so that collective ownership is very key to making sure that the work that comes in front of us is built upon inclusive values. The next one is what I call align in. We have to align our innovation, and that's the work. That's the tools that we're using and bringing in all these great tools we heard about over the last couple days. That innovation strategy, and when you're changing the way you do business, you have to align that with your inclusion strategy. Because as you are building out that work, making sure that you have the right people at the table to be able to help you move that forward is very, very important. And that is really focused on how are you making sure that inclusion is not just some shiny thing on the side, that it's nice to have, and nice to think about how you have more women at the table. How do you think about those that are living with a disability, that they are provided a seat at the table with this work, that it's not shiny over there, that it's really built into the work that you're doing. Because it's very important to make sure that you understand when you go on this journey that sometimes it's going to call for changing people, making decisions, changing policies, and also changing processes. And so it's very important that you have that alignment in what you're doing. The next strategy is really focused on capabilities, and inclusion just doesn't happen. And so you need to make sure that you're deploying those strategies internally that are targeted and that prioritize initiatives and strategies that drive sustainable change. So really focused on examples that really bring all of your teams to the table. And so some organizations have done things such as build diversity and inclusion councils, provide their team members with unconscious bias trainings, develop dashboards to see where you are in terms of what you have decided with respect to building your workforce, that you are being thoughtful about reaching out and finding those individuals that meet the need that you're trying to solve. And so that is very important around that internal capability. And again, starting from the top, but making sure that it's not a shiny thing on the side and that's aligned. All right, and the last thing I'll just say, related to the last two, is just building the bench. That you have to start now. You have to make sure that you're out there with internships, apprenticeships, and really focused on making sure that people see themselves in the work. And the last one is just building partnerships. Inclusion work doesn't have to happen alone. As you do your work in terms of stakeholder engagement, and as you're really focused on meeting your community where you are, building those relationships, because you never know that your stakeholder that you're planning for could actually be your colleague. And so how are you being thoughtful about how you're telling people about geodesign? So those are the 5 strategies that I'm hoping that you will think about deploying in your environment to build an inclusive workforce. And I'll be at the discussion table if you want to talk further and go deeper into those strategies, and I'm happy to connect otherwise. So thank you all.